Hey everyone, welcome to the fourth lecture of this course. In this lecture, we're going to be going over for loops and while loops. Um, so there are a number of different loops. They all stem from either a for loop or a while loop. Um, so there are things like for in loops, for of loops, do while loops, etc. They're all deviations from these basic loops. The for of and for in loops, for example, they're typically used to iterate through collections such as arrays or hash maps, but those are data structures that we haven't gotten into yet. But we eventually will, and then they will come up and we'll go over them then. But for now, for the time being, this is more than enough, and I think if you guys are able to master these loops, the basic for loop and the basic while loop, you should have absolutely no issues picking up the rest of them. Okay, let's get into it. Let's get started with for loops. So what are for loops? For loops look a little bit something like this. This is kind of the, I guess you could call anatomy of a for loop. Let me show you in some code here. So in this for loop, right here, we are going to write we're going to have a console log all of the numbers between 0 and 4, right? So when I run this, you see here it's 0, 1, 2, 3, and then 4. So how does that work? Well, the way that this works is you start with, you have these three, there's three like conditions, right? So condition 1 is the starting condition or the initial condition. So I give you two examples here. This one is a little bit more detailed, the first one, and the second one is a little more simplified and typically what we're going to use. So a loop is going to execute a block of code, which is this block in here that you see. It's going to execute it over and over and over again until this condition that you see in the middle here is false. So how does that work, right? So we have the initial condition here. So we're saying, okay, we're gonna initiate a variable, I equals 0, and we're gonna say while or until this condition is false, increment it by 1 and execute the code, right? So this condition is executed at the end of every single code execution. So this is the same as doing this in here. That's what this symbolizes, okay? If I run this now, it'll actually increment I by 2 because we're doing it twice. We're doing it once in here and once in here. Now, which one will execute first? This I will actually execute first, and then this one will, because this, whatever you put in this last block here, this increment decrement, or here you can see execute at the end of every iteration, that's what's going to happen, right? Whatever you put here, it's going to execute at the end of every iteration. And we need to increment this because otherwise we'll have an infinite loop. So if I do 0, 0 here, for example, well, you know what? Let me run it the other way so you see it first. Let's do this. So plus plus. Let's get rid of this for a second. And if I do this now, you'll see it prints out 0, 2, and 4 because we're incrementing it by 2 because of this one extra I plus plus at the end. So if I delete this and I do minus minus, this is what's called an infinite loop. So you want to be very careful with infinite loops. Okay, that's one of the biggest it's one of the biggest things that gets beginners when they're first learning how to write loops is they end up writing infinite loops and they don't know how to stop them or they don't know what to do. So when that happens, so I'm going to run this, you're going to see it's just going to keep going and going and going. What you want to do is you want to do Control C and just type Control C, Control, oh, no, that doesn't work. There it is, yep, Control C. And that's how you stop it, that's how you kill it. The other way to kill it is you can use this button We'll clear. No, I don't think you can actually. Yeah, so just do Control C to kill it. So I'll put this in here at the top. If stuck in infinite loop, use Control plus C to kill it. That's how you kill the program in this console. So you got to make sure it's clicked, selected, Control, and then C, like that. Yeah, it doesn't do that. Okay. All right. So that's pretty much the anatomy of a for loop. That's kind of how they're structured. That's the basic way to do it. Now, another thing that you want to notice is it only goes up to 4, right? Because we're saying I is less than 5. So what happens here is, I'll take you through step by step, okay? So the first step, it goes, okay, we're going to initialize this I to be 0, and this only executes one time, okay? This, whatever you put in this first little before this first semicolon, is only going to execute once, and you're pretty much just, like I said, setting the initial condition. Then we're going to look at this and we're going to say, okay, I is 0 right now. Okay, so right now I equals 0. I is indeed less than 5. Okay, so then what we're going to do is we're not going to go here. Okay, we're not doing that. We're doing that at the end. It goes here, here, and then it goes into this block. So it goes kind of like that. And then this block's going to execute. You can do other stuff in here, obviously. You can do whatever you like. I'm just putting a console log so you can see the values. And then this I is 0, and then you get that console log to be 0. And then it's going to come down here. It's going to finish. Then it's going to come back up here. And then it's going to increment the I by 1. Okay? So now, that's after the first iteration. Now we're in the second iteration. Okay, I is now equal to 1 because we finished the first iteration and incremented it. Right? So now I is equal to 1. Again, we go to the for loop. We do not go over this. This only executes on the first loop, on the first iteration. That's it. So now we're on the second one, right? This is the second iteration, and we're going here now. Okay, we're saying I is less than 5. It is. Okay, so then let's execute this block of code again. All right, here it is. I equals 1, so console log 1. Then we're done executing. We're going to go up here. Now it's going to be I equals 2. You see that? That's how that works. And you're pretty much going to do this all the way through. I equals 3. I equals 4. Until you get to I equals 4. Okay? Now we're at I equals 4. We're going to check. Okay, 4 is indeed less than 5. So let's execute it. Boom, here it is. We're going to increment I by 1. So I equals 5 now. Right? Now, this is done. Now we're going to go again. Now I is equal to 5. 5 is not less than 5, right? So it will not execute. This is when the loop stops. Okay, and this is why it does not log the 5. Okay, now if you look down here, I wrote a little bit of code that has this equal to. Everything else is the same. So if we do less than or equal to, okay, then it indeed will actually include the 5. So it's going to go 0 to 5. So if we do that, you'll see there it is, 0 to 5. We can start this off at any number we want. We can start it off at 1. And this will give us 1 to 5. See that? We can start this off at 12. If I start this off at 12, what do you think will happen? See? That's right, nothing, because it's looking at this and saying, okay, I is equal to 12, because remember, this is our first iteration, and it's going to compare it. Is 12 less than or equal to 5? No? Okay, break, you're done. And that's how that works. All right. So another thing you can do is we can go through here with these other loops. these other for loops here that we have as examples. Okay. So these for loops, all right, these are starting at, well, this was, I already showed you guys this in the other example up here, where you can start this off at a different number, this I, so I'm not going to go through that again. But the point of this one is to show you that you can actually increment this I by more than just 1. You can increment it by anything you want. You can even use multiplication, actually, if you wanted to. So if we run this, we're going to start off at 1, and we're going to go until we are less than or equal to 10, right? And what happened here is we incremented it by 2, right? So we start off at 1. 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 2 is 5, plus 2 is 7, plus 2 is 9, plus 2 is 11, but 11 is not less than 10, right? So that's why it only went to 9. If we start this off at 2, if you notice, this is all of our, this prints off all of the odd numbers. So now this is going to give us all of our even numbers. So when we run this, there's all our even numbers. And it goes up to 10 this time. Pretty neat, right? Okay. Let's go to while loops. While loops. Here is how a while loop is structured. So a while loop just has just a condition. You can have multiple conditions in here. You can have multiple conditions in the for loop as well, but it's pretty rare. Usually there's only one. But in while loops, it's more common to see multiple conditions in while loops than it is in for loops. And pretty much what a while loop does is, this is the syntax for it. You say while, and then you have these parentheses here. And you say while some condition is true, we're going to execute this block of code. Now, while loops are way more prone to infinite loops than for loops are. Because in a for loop, you have this that automatically sets that condition to make it eventually stop, right? So because of this little incrementer right here that we're incrementing by 2, it's going to eventually hit the case where this is going to end up being false and it's going to stop. Where with a while loop, you actually have to write the case yourself inside of the loop. And I'll show you that right now. So here we have a while loop that is just going to print all the numbers between 0 and 9. Okay, so when I run this, there it is, 0 to 9. So you see it's kind of similar to a for loop. You have to put that I outside of it. So that's one of the differences, is you have to initialize this outside of this while loop, where with a for loop, you're able to put it inside of these little brackets, inside of the parentheses. And then you have this code block that it's going to execute. We're going to console log, but then we have to remember to increment this, okay? If you don't have this in here, it will just forever print 0, right? So I'm going to show you that right now. Watch. See, it's just printing 0 over and over again, and then you have to kill it. See that? It just printed 0 a million times. So that's what's tricky with for loops, okay? You have to be very careful with them, and you have to remember to make sure to meet this condition eventually. This condition has to be met, otherwise you're going to be stuck in an infinite loop, right? There it goes. Okay. Here's another example with a while loop. Comment this out. So in this example, we're going to print all even numbers between 0 and 10, right? So here we have I. We have I that equals 10. And we're saying, well, I is greater than 0 if I is divisible by 2. Well, actually, this should be like that. We're going to console log it. And then we're going to decrement I by 1. So when we run this, there it is. 10, 8, 6, 4, and 2. It's going backwards because we started with I being 10. So if you start high, you have to make sure to decrement, right? And if you start low, you have to make sure to increment. So that's that's a rule you can follow. Yeah, you can also do the, well, I had it before. This will give you all the odd numbers between 0 and 10. There you go. 9, 7, 5, 3, and 1. Okay. And now I'm going to show you guys break. We have break and continue. So with break, if you remember in the last lesson, breaks were used in switch statements. But they can also be used in loops, okay? They can be used in for loops or while loops, either or. So in this case, what's going to happen is we're going to go through, we're going to start off at 10, and the condition is I is going to be greater than 0, and we're going to decrement, right? Because we're starting at a high number and we're going down to 0. And what we're saying is, if I is equal to 6, break. Okay? And then otherwise, we're just going to console log this I at every iteration. Okay? So let's see what happens when I equals 6. Look at that. You see? It only printed, it printed 10, 9, 8 to 7, and it stopped at 6. So that's what break is. Break breaks out of the loop. So cancels the loop, right? Breaks it. Breaks out of loop. That's what that does. Kind of like with the switch statement, if you remember in the last lesson. The switch statement, when it used the break, it literally just broke out of the switch statement. Break it out. Break. Done. Right? Continue is another very powerful statement to use with loops. And again, both of these, break and continue, you can use them in while loops as well. So in this one, we have, or again, we're starting at 10, and we're decrementing. But this time what we're doing is we're saying if I is even, we're going to continue. Okay? So let's see what happens. Look at that. So this prints all of the odd numbers because we are not hitting this console log. You see that? We're actually not hitting this because we're continuing the loop. So whenever there's an even number, we're going to hit this continue, and that's it. Continue means skip, right? Or next step, kind of like that, where the break cancels the entire loop and just breaks out of it. This just cancels current iteration. Or you can think of it as continue to next iteration. That's what that does. And this is also very powerful. You won't see these too much, honestly. I don't use them a lot, but you do see them, and you will use them. But they're not super common. Okay, the next concept we have is what's called a nested loop. So this is a loop inside of a loop, and you can also you can also actually do this with while loops too. It doesn't have to be a for loop. You can do it with while loops. So this could be a while loop in here instead of a for loop. So what this is doing is this is printing out the multiplication table. So here we're starting off at a equals 1, and we're going up to 10. And then we're console logging start. So the reason I have this is because I want you to see when this inner loop executes, right? So when it starts executing and when it stops executing. And this is our B, right? So this is 1 through 10 again, and here we're just multiplying it, and you'll see that in the output down here, and then we just end it. So let's run it. So there it is. See? Here's our 1, 2, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, and 10s. And that's our multiplication table, and that's how you would use a nested loop. Now let me show you this. If I was to mix the two, right? If I was to mix a for loop and a while loop. So the way you would do this is you would say while, and you just take this and you move it up. So we're going to take this, we're going to put it above here. We're going to take this condition, and we're going to put this condition inside of here. And we have to take this console log, and that's what we want to do. And at the end, we got to put this condition. The ending condition has to be at the end of the while loop, like that. And this should, theoretically, give us the same result as this one. So let's comment this one out. And here we go. Let's see how this works. There you go. And give us the same exact output. And you could convert this one into a while loop as well, but I'll let you do that if you want to try it. It would be a good little thing to practice. So anyway, that's it. That's while loops. While loops and for loops. They're kind of simple. They're a very fundamental and very basic. Not basic as in terms of like, oh, it's basic and easy. Basic in terms of this is like you have to know these. They're used a lot everywhere in a lot of different places because in the real world you're going to be working with data structures and you're going to want to go iterate through those data structures, right? So if you have a collection of names or addresses and people, right? If you think of a phone book, okay, a phone book has a bunch of addresses in it, right? Or numbers, right? Phone numbers. You're going to want to iterate through all of those phone numbers to find a certain number that you want. So that's very, very important. Yeah, so if you guys have any questions regarding this specific lesson, go ahead and put your questions in the comments, and I will try to get back to you as soon as I can. And also, don't forget to look at the description box and read up more on loops and some of the references that I list. Okay, thank you.